Hi everybody, welcome to B7, the nervous system. So we're going to be talking about the nervous system and what it actually does for our bodies. Now it's important to remember when we're talking about all the organs of the bodies, the heart, the lungs, our kidneys, our liver, that none of them are working independently of one another, okay? Which basically means that they all work together. Okay, or that their actions are coordinated. Okay, our breathing rate is coordinated, our heart rate is coordinated, and so there has to be systems in place to coordinate the different organs and how they work together. Now, the nervous system is one of two systems that does that. What the nervous system does, it deals with rapid but short-lasting responses. Okay, so responses that need to be rapid. Okay, but they're always, or normally, they are short-lasting. We also have the endocrine system, which is the hormonal system, which is the other system which coordinates the responses of our organs, but they're much slower and they're much longer lasting in their response time. So this unit is specifically going to focus on the nervous system. Okay, so in the nervous system, everything kind of works together. You've got in mammals and other invertebrates, you've got the nervous system is arranged as shown in this diagram. It consists of the brain up here. You've got the spinal cord, which form what we call the central nervous system. So the brain and our spinal cord are the central nervous system, and they're connected to various parts of the body by what we call the peripheral nervous system. So you can see these things coming off here. These are actually nerve cells or neurons, okay, coming off from the central nervous system. And they make up what we call the peripheral nervous system, okay? And they're made up of all the nerve cells that go elsewhere around our body. So information flows through the nervous system all the way around these two systems. And so we're going to be looking at how they link together. Okay, so how do they link together? Well, okay, let's have a very quick look. How does a message get from one place to another? So you've got what we call a stimulus. Now, a stimulus can be anything from a pinprick in the skin to heat. It could be light. It's anything that our body detects, okay, or anything that is detected. So in this instance, you've got a pin, which is our stimulus. Well, a pin is the object which is going to poke the skin. That poking of the skin is going to be the stimulus, okay? That's going to be detected by a receptor in our skin. So there is a special little receptor cell in our skin which detects that change. Okay, the change is then going to be sent down as a nerve impulse, okay, through our sensory neuron. Okay, so this is a type of nerve cell. Okay, that nerve cell is going to go straight into our spinal column. Oops. And in our spinal column, it's going to change from the sensory neuron over to our interneuron or relay neuron. Okay, now this point here, this is the point that we call coordination. So in our bodies, either the brain coordinates the response or our spinal column coordinates the response. Okay, if it's something that we need to think about, okay, if we need to consider the response and make a decision, then that message goes to the brain. If it doesn't need coordinating, then it goes simply to the spinal column, to the relay neuron. The relay neuron then passes the message back to what we call a motor neuron, which is this one coming back. The motor neuron takes the message back to what we call an effector or a muscle. Okay, the muscle is known as an effector, which brings about a response. Now, if this was the case, it would be the pin would prick our skin, the message would travel all around our system and back to the muscle, which would be the muscle of the arm, and our response would be to pull our arm away from that pinprick. Now, what do we mean by a nerve impulse? Okay, what do we mean by that? So a nervous impulse is an electrical impulse. So what's happening in these types of nerve cells is that the message is transferred into a type of electrical signal called an action potential. Okay, you can call it a nerve impulse or an action potential. Either one is fine, which is what travels down the neurons. Oops. Okay, so here you can see in a bit more detail the different types of neurons that we get. Okay, now lots of people wonder what is the difference between nerves, okay, a nerve and a neuron. Okay, and very much the easiest way to remember it is that a nerve is simply lots and lots of neurons combined together. So here you can see an electron micrograph. So this is taken using an electron microscope, a scanning electron microscope. And you can see these bundles of nerves. Each of these is a neuron. So this is a neuron, this is another one. Each of these little things here is a neuron, okay, or the axon of a neuron. So it's this bit, okay, showing it from a transverse section, so a cut through the actual cells itself. So this is a nerve. It's simply lots and lots of neurons combined together, okay, into a nerve bundle. So this is what we mean by a nerve. But if we pulled each of these out, each one would be an individual neuron. Okay, so let's start with the sensory neurons. Okay, so the sensory neurons have some very special features. All neurons have essentially the same features, okay, but in differing kind of quantities. Okay, so an axon on the sensory neuron, which is this neuron, is going to be the same as the axon on our motor neuron. All right, but they've just got a few different features between them. So the first things we can see here are the dendrites. So the dendrites are the part, these dendrites would be in contact with our receptor. So the receptor would relay the message to the dendrites, and that's where the action potential would be initiated from. And it would start and it would spread going down this. Now this is what we call the axon, okay? And this is the long fiber that goes down the middle, which is this blue area here, okay? Travels all the way down the axon to the axon terminals, okay? It goes across the gap between the axon terminals and the dendrites of our relay neuron, which is this one. Now this gap here is called a synapse. Travels down through there in the same one, down the axon to the motor neuron, through the motor neuron to the muscles, okay? So to the axon terminals here, and then there would be a muscle at the bottom here. Now a few things to notice the difference of, okay? In the sensory neuron, the cell body, where the nucleus is kept, is kind of in the center, all right? It's kind of in the center here. The cell body in relay neuron is kind of where you would find the dendrites. So this is the dendrites of the relay neuron, which these dendrites are these little branch bits, and you can see the nucleus is there. And in a motor neuron, it's similar to a relay neuron where the nucleus is kept up where the dendrites are. Okay, so it's only in the sensory neuron where you would find the cell body in the kind of the center of the cell. Okay, so we're going to discuss a little bit more detail now the structure. So, like I said, the dendrites, they collect information from other cells, so from receptors. What happens then? The nerve impulses travels down the axon. So the axon is a long fiber which carries the information away from the cell body, sometimes over very long distances. So there's nerve cells in our bodies which are up to 2 meters long, which is incredibly long. You can see around the axon, you've got this kind of fatty sheath. Okay, we call this, this fatty sheath is made from what we call myelin. Okay, now you can see this myelin, it's around, this is the axon in the middle, and this white section around the outside is the myelin sheath. And what that does, it's insulating the nervous impulse, and it speeds up the transmission, or the rate at which the action potential moves down. Okay. You then have the end plate or axon terminals. Okay, this is where you get the synapse. So right here, this is the end plate or the axon terminal. The cell body simply controls the metabolism. So you've got the this is where you might find mitochondria. So there's respiration going on, and this is obviously also where the blueprint for the cell is being kept inside the nucleus. Okay. Now you can see that between this myelin sheath, you've got little gaps. Okay, a gap here, and a gap here. We call these little gaps the nodes of Ranvier. And what they do is they allow the rapid conduction of impulses by forcing them to jump from one node to the next. So instead of the message traveling straight through the middle here, what it does, it gets to this point and then jumps to here, jumps to here, and jumps to here, and that's controlled by this myelin sheath. Okay, it's insulating the axon and stopping, okay, the the signal traveling through it. So it actually speeds up those messages. Now you can see in the interneuron or the relay neuron doesn't have any myelin sheath. It's unmyelinated. There's no myelin sheath, whereas the motor neuron is myelinated. Okay? So, but again, it's very similar features between all of them. Okay, that brings us to reflex actions. Okay, now reflex actions are actions that don't generally involve any conscious thought. So neurons act together in many complex ways to bring about the correct response. The simplest type of response is called a reflex action. It's a rapid automatic response to a stimulus. So for example, jerking your hand away from a sharp or hot object. So the nerve pathway involved in the reflex action is called a reflex arc, which is shown in here on the page. They're there to help us survive. All right, so in this case, you can see there's a pinprick. The message travels down the sensory neuron, okay, through there to the relay neuron in our spinal column. It's not going anywhere near the brain. The relay neuron then passes it on back to the motor neuron, travels down the motor neuron to the muscle in the arm, which pulls our arm away. Now we can have a look on BBC Bitesize very quickly at how that is coordinated. So let's have a look. All right, so in this one, we've got our hand being brought close, okay, the heat. All right, so let's have a look at that again. So step one is the stimulus, the heat. Step two is the pain receptor becomes stimulated. Step three, the signal is sent along our sensory neuron. Step four, the signal is passed along the relay neuron. Some of the message is sent to the brain, but a lot of the signal is sent back via a motor neuron. And the affected muscle contracts, pulling your hand away. Okay? So other examples are what happens to our eyes in light. So in bright light, the radial muscles contract. The radial muscles in the iris relax, and the circular muscles of the iris contract, and less light enters the light. So let's have a look here. So in bright light, okay, you can see our pupil. Okay, so at the moment that's in dim light because the pupil, remember, is very small. That's dim light. Pupil gets much bigger to allow more light in, and in bright light, the pupil gets much smaller to allow less light in. Okay, so let's go very quickly back to this. So yeah, simply the brain isn't required. Now I'm going to save the eye. We're not going to do the eye right now because that's been quite a long video. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll come back to look at the eye. Thank you.